signing a trade deal with Japan, whereby Japan is going to buy excess wheat that the United States farmers would have sold to China. He said Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's Japan was going to buy that at a fair price. What I'm saying here is that President Trump has been very keen to sort of say essentially that his style of bilateral doing business nation to nation, not multinationally, is working. That he has given an indication that he is close to making trade deals with a number of different countries, including, it seems, with France. But there have been no signatures here. So a lot of this sounds like posturing, positioning, you might call it spin, but no signatures yet. And I think until you get the signature on that agreement, it is only a conversation that's been held here, maybe a positive one, but it hasn't reached conclusion yet.
And earlier today, Nick, we did see that there was a session on one of the most pressing issues facing the world right now, climate change. But one noticeable absence was the US president. What is the reason for that?
Well, the reason that US officials gave was a very simple one, and on the face of it, it seemed, somewhat reasonable that President Trump was delayed because he was meeting with Angela Merkel and the Prime Minister of India, Modi, to have bilateral meetings with them. Indeed, there were bilateral meetings with those leaders this morning. But it seemed that President Trump was either confused about the timing, because when he was asked why wasn't he there, he said that meeting on the climate change will be coming up later. But when you scrutinize what his officials said, that he couldn't go because he was meeting with Merkel and Modi, that didn't stand up to the sniff test, because there was a photograph of Merkel and Modi both at that meeting. So we don't have a real reason yet. We do know that the president didn't think that the climate change issue was a particularly important one here at the G7.
All right, Nick Robertson, we will talk to you again soon. Good to have you there, staying across it all for us. Thanks so much. Well, Iranian Foreign Minister Mohammad Javad Zarif is in Beijing right now after his surprise visit to Biarritz, France, which turned heads at the G7 summit. It comes as Iran says it deployed its most advanced warship to patrol the Gulf of Aden. Sam Kiley joins us now. He is monitoring all the developments from Jerusalem. Good to have you with us, Sam. So, tensions are obviously high in the Strait of Hormuz. This is one of the world's most important shipping routes. I understand that there is a tanker protection missile underway with US allies. At the same time, Iran has deployed its own destroyer.
Yes, Iran once again kind of rather ingeniously in some ways upping the ante by deploying this destroyer, a modern destroyer by Iranian standards, only recently commissioned, plus support ships. It is saying that it has vessels that are in danger in the same or similar area as others. Bear in mind that the attacks on at least four tankers in the past with mines were never acknowledged as Iranian attacks by Iran, but nonetheless the Gulf of Aden has a problem, or at least the Red Sea has a problem with, or has had a problem with piracy, but above all with the capture sometimes of Iranian vessels by other nations as part of the international coalition's efforts in Yemen, where the Iranians are backing Houthis. It's all a rather complicated picture, but essentially they're saying if you're going to run warships through this seascape, we're going to do the same. And this all coming after a weekend in which the Israelis have said very, very rapidly that they directly targeted Iranian assets that were allegedly trying to get some what they call killer drones off the ground on Saturday night with a view to attack northern Israel. Then on top of that, there's been reports of alleged Israeli drones being downed in Beirut, complaints from a Palestinian militant group also in the Lebanon that it was hit with allegedly by Israeli airstrikes. The Israelis denying or simply not responding to the Lebanese allegations whatsoever. And then again, we have reports of another mysterious round of airstrikes, this time against the Iranian-backed militias in Iraq, at least the fourth that I'm aware of over the last month or so. Again, no acknowledgement that the Israelis were behind it, but something that the Israelis quite like other people to think, Linda.
All right, Sam Carney, a lot to discuss from that region. We will come back to you shortly. Thanks so much. I want to take a look at Wall Street now. It is higher in early trading after President Trump's comments about a chance of resuming trade talks with China. Right now, you can see the Dow is up 150 points. That follows a more than 600-point drop Friday after the president announced that he intended to increase tariffs on Chinese imports. European markets have generally been higher today as well after a steep drop in the Asia markets. Julia Chudley is standing by in New York to talk us through all of this, Julia. And of course, we did see the markets bouncing back right now after President Trump's comments that seem to indicate renewed talks between high levels of officials from China and the US. Take us through the reaction.
Good morning, Linda. I think we're clutching at straws a little bit here, and you've seen us soften actually even in the last 10 minutes or so. I think it's very tough to call ahead of yet another press conference and comments, of course, from President Macron and President Trump within the hour. And I think that's going to be crucial for investors here too, just to hear what the latest is on trade, because the noises over the weekend have thrown us one way and thrown us another way. I think what we're seeing this morning actually is a bit of a bounce back, as you alluded to, from the sell-off. The pressure that we saw on Friday is we saw a ratcheting up of the tensions. Then we got the suggestion from President Trump that the Chinese have called and said, look, we want to get back around the negotiating table. Not been confirmed right now from the Chinese side. And even Stephen Mnuchin over at the G7 sort of prevaricating on whether or not that happened. So I think the bottom line is investors are hoping, wanting to see some kind of path to resolution or at least negotiations on this trade deal. But I think what you have to see from what we got over the last 72 hours is it's going to remain noisy here. So I think for investors dipping their toes back in today, they're going to remain cautious, and they're going to do that, I think, until these trade talks resume come September, assuming they do.
Absolutely. As you mentioned, China hasn't confirmed the president's comments about whether there are talks that have resumed. But we did see some comments from officials about wanting to restore calm. How much impact is President Trump's comments having when we're seeing these huge swings back and forth on the markets week after week?
You know, that's a great point, and I think we do need to provide context here. For all the choppiness that we saw last week, we only, and I couch that only, lost around 1.5% for the US majors here. We're 6% off record highs. The S&P 500 still up 13% year to date. So I'd argue, for all the concern, for all the cautiousness about the damage, the uncertainty that the trade war could create going forward, the US markets in particular are remaining pretty resilient here. The critical question, of course, is if this continues to be an ongoing issue and the rhetoric continues, can they remain so? But for now, I think investors are sort of cautiously optimistic. The question is, are they right to be so, at least for the United States here, Linda?
Absolutely. Julia Chudley, good to have you live from New York. Thanks so much. We'll stay with CNN. We're going to bring you the Trump-Macron news conference as soon as it begins. You can see the live shot there from the south of France, where the G7 summit is about to wrap up. Also ahead, the fires consuming the Amazon rainforest have prompted action from some of the world's most powerful leaders. We'll tell you what the French president says the G7 plans to do. And police drawing guns to disperse crowds armed with metal poles. Pro-democracy demonstrations in Hong Kong taking a violent turn. We're going to have the latest on the unrest ahead.
Celebrate the racing season in style with CNN.
This month's winning post, an elegant life, samples the delights of South Korea and explores the nation's increasing hunger for horse racing.
Winning Post, an elegant life. Thursday on CNN in association with Longines. All new Inside Africa. Unlocking the mysteries behind a continent you thought you knew. In Kenya, a community adds a mother's touch to help orphaned elephants.
We have to rescue, rehabilitation, and then rebuilding these animals back to the wild.
Inside Africa, Tuesday on CNN, in association with Zenith Bank.
Today we live in an unpredictable environment and news races around the world at breakneck speed.
I didn't know what his intention was. I knew it could be obstruction of justice.
My show brings you the latest news and top news makers.
Are you playing with fire?
And we also dive below the headlines to explore vital issues impacting our lives.
It's about right and wrong.
You have to stand up for what you believe in.
We need to realize that our future is at risk and we need to take action.
Was that kind of mortifying or did you enjoy it? You were great.
It's crucial we make sense of what's happening. Do you regret that? Do you think there should be nuclear power or more commitment to a clean environment?
New Zealand had its experience and changed its laws. To be honest with you, I do not understand the United States.
Does love have a chance of winning?
I won't believe that.
And fully understand what's at stake.
Aman Kaur, Tuesday to Saturday on CNN.
Welcome back. You are looking at a live shot from the G7 summit in the south of France, where we are waiting to hear from the presidents of the US and France. They will speak as that conference is about to wrap up. We're going to take you there live when it happens. It is scheduled to happen in about 15 minutes' time, so we'll see there shortly. Well, the French president, Emmanuel Macron, has already announced a $20 million emergency fund to help fight those fires burning in the Amazon rainforest. These are the images of Brazil's Amazon rainforest. It is obviously part of an area that is the hardest hit by the massive blaze. More than 80,000 fires have been recorded in Brazil this year. That's the highest number since 2013. Well, the crisis has gotten the attention of the G7 summit in France, where leaders have agreed on a plan to help. Brazil's president tweeted last hour that Macron's comments are an attack. Brazilians have been protesting what they say is a lack of action by President Bolsonaro. But the effects of the fires got far beyond the country's borders. The Amazon rainforest absorbs carbon emissions and provides about 1/5 of the world's oxygen. CNN's Nick Payton-Walsh got a first-hand look from above the disaster.
There's little below but ghosts, and even they seem to be given up on. These are the newest fires in the worst hit state in the Amazon. We didn't see below us any of the 43,000 troops Brazil's president has pledged to the fight. In fact, in some places, it's so bad you can't even see how bad it is. That'll suit just fine those who'd rather ignore the world's most urgent environmental crisis. No matter how high you are, you can't escape the smoke. We even close our air vents inside the plane to stop it. The sun made this green paradise over millennia, but now barely peeks through the smoke of its destruction.
Well, these apocalyptic sites are kind of like the warnings about what might happen if the world doesn't do something about the climate crisis that you keep hearing. But instead, it's right below us, right here, and right now.
What's startling is how much of this immense jungle people have managed to destroy in so short a time.
Unbelievable.
They had help. Fires they lit and that happen naturally in the dry heat, but usually peak later in the year.
This is not just a forest burning, this is almost a cemetery, because all you can see is dead. Amazon, it's extremely fundamental for the water system for all over the continent. So if we cut off the forest, in some years we're not going to have rain on the south of the country.
We find another area where the damage is fresher and easier to see. Raging in straight lines, swallowing everything left on the plain. And when you look at this, you learn something about yourself. Do you see a crisis impacting every fifth breath you take and killing the future? Or do you see what man must do to nature to enrich himself and live better? The answer means little below, where the fire burns our heritage and suffocates our future, regardless of how we feel about it.
senior international correspondent Nick Payton-Walsh joins us now from Porto Viejo in western Brazil. Good to have you with us, Nick. So we've just heard the latest line on this story, which is that obviously the G7 summit leaders are offering $20 million, but it sounds like Brazil's president doesn't want it. Just take us through the reaction there.
It's complicated, really, because I think Brazil has accepted Israeli help already from a specialist aircraft, but it's the tone, I think, that Jair Bolsonaro feels Brazil is being addressed, that actually he seems to seize upon to feed his agenda. Now, yes, there's $20 million in emergency aid from the G7. We haven't had a categoric rejection of that from Brazil yet, but it's sort of being bound up in this extraordinary separate issue of the spat between France's Emmanuel Macron and Bolsonaro himself. Now, this originated a couple of days ago when Macron called Bolsonaro essentially a liar over environmental policy. Then we find on social media a meme was put out which was offensive towards Macron's wife. And that has now caused Macron, after Bolsonaro commented on that meme, to suggest essentially that they hoped at some point Brazil will get a president who's up to the job. Now, he also called the meme extraordinarily offensive. Frankly, it was, there's no doubt about that. The question is, we're in this massive distraction here from the urgent task in hand. My eyes are stinging because of the smoke that's around this town of Porto Viejo. There's no doubt that there are fires still raging in this intense heat. Are we getting any nearer to an international response to that? The answer is no. Instead, we have an international spat about it. Now, it is possible that President Bolsonaro may decide to welcome in some international aid about this. It has to come pretty fast, frankly, and his own army have to get those 43,000 troops out there pretty fast as well to get a grip on the fires. The problem is he's wrapping up, Bolsonaro, a lot of this international response in the rhetoric that kind of put him in power, saying this is colonial powers trying to tell Brazil what to do. His point is this is Brazil's resource to get hold of, and Brazil's long had environmental laws protecting it. That's kind of a nonsense to some degree when you fly over it and see how heavily deforested some parts of this are. But all of this debate about what should happen isn't getting to the core of the issue, which is there's a fire over there that needs putting out. It's kind of just baiting, frankly, who did the decorating inside a house while it's busy burning down. We simply don't have the response here that needs to come. And the debate, I think, in the days ahead will be whether or not Brazil can be pressured. There's been suggestions of trade sanctions, other things too, into accepting that help, or whether it can deal with the job itself. Linda?
All right, Nick Payton-Walsh for us in Porto Viejo in Brazil. Good to have you with us on the story. We will speak to you again soon. Thanks so much. For anyone wanting more information about the fires or how you can help, you can visit our website at cnn.com/impact. Well, Harvey Weinstein appeared in a New York court a short time ago. The disgraced movie producer pleading not guilty and was charged with two new counts of sexual assault. The court wrapped up just moments ago. Jean Gazaris is outside the court in New York. Take us through what happened, Jean.
Well, what we just learned, we knew that the grand jury had returned an indictment, but we now know they returned an indictment on two new charges against Harvey Weinstein: predatory sexual assault. Now, we have not yet seen the indictment. It has been sealed. The clerk's office does not have it prepared yet. But what we just heard in court was that in addition to all the charges that there already are, which are 2 counts of predatory sexual assault, criminal sexual act in the first degree rape, third-degree rape, now 2 additional charges. The prosecutor did say that if the judge finds them duplicative of the former predatory sexual assault charges, they can be consolidated and just go with the last 2, the most current charges. We do know that prosecutors have wanted another witness to testify against Harvey Weinstein. They brought it up in a bill of particulars in February. CNN has confirmed through a source that that would be actress Annabella Sciorra. She was on The Sopranos. She has alleged that Harvey Weinstein raped her in the winter months of 1993 and 1994. It appears via this indictment she will be able to testify. The 2 accusers in this case, the alleged victims of this actual case, are alleging that Harvey Weinstein, one of them, raped her in her hotel room in New York City in 2013. Another is alleging that Weinstein sexually assaulted her in his apartment in 2006. Harvey Weinstein has pleaded not guilty to all of these charges. He believes, he was asked in court today by the judge, you want to go to trial? He says, not really, not on this weak case, but he is facing life in prison.
And speaking of that trial, it was set to get underway next month. It has been pushed back to January. Just explain what's next.
Well, January will be the beginning of this trial because of these two new charges. In the ensuing months, motions will go back and forth in regard to these two new charges. Everything will be firmed up so that jury selection can begin just at the first of the year.
All right, Jean Cazares, good to have you with us there in Manhattan. Thanks so much. Still ahead on CNN, we'll bring you the Trump-Macron press conference as soon as it begins. That is a live shot from the south of France where the three-day summit is just about to wrap up. Stay with us.
Traveling is not just about seeing places with the most likes or getting iconic photos.
Amazing.
It's about finding the city's DNA, meeting people who share its secrets. It's about making discoveries that wow you and make you feel like a child again. It's a world of wonder. Now go and see it. Wednesday on CNN in association with Turkish Airlines.
On the next, Africa Looks East, I'm in South Africa.
And I'm in Japan to show you why business leaders here are investing in Africa.
From driving new opportunities forward,
the transfer of skills from Japanese to Kenyan. The importance of that is immense.
to digging into the future and connecting the continent to the world. These are the ways Japan is partnering with Africa.
Africa Looks East, Saturday on CNN. Connect the world with Becky Anderson.
It all starts here. Changing, fighting, creating, connecting. That's why we're here. We live here, we work here, we're from here, and we'll go wherever the story takes us.
I'm Becky Anderson in Tehran.
We are in Jerusalem. Real news that shapes our world. Exploring not just what's going on, but why. I just want to press you on one further point. Getting perspective on this region from this region. Places that many of us know, but few of us get to see. Observing countries on the move, still rooted in tradition. It all starts here, and that's why we're here, bringing you the world from our Middle Eastern hub.
Connect the world with Becky Anderson, tonight on CNN.
I'm Fred Plankton in Eastern Greenland, and this is CNN.
Welcome back to the International Desk. I'm Linda Kincaid. Good to have you with us. We are waiting for the French and US presidents to speak at the close of the G7 summit in France. You're looking there at a live shot where the two presidents will take the stage shortly. Emmanuel Macron and Donald Trump are scheduled to face reporters any minute now. We're going to take you there live. Leaders, of course, from the world's largest economies have spent the weekend discussing a range of issues from climate change to Iran's nuclear ambitions. Senior international correspondent Jim Bitterman is following the summit for us from France and joins us now live. Jim, we were talking over the weekend that there wasn't going to be sort of any joint communique, which was breaking with tradition, really. Now it sounds like there is some sort of agreement on Iran. What can we expect?
Well, it's a pretty vague agreement, Linda. It's basically an assessment of where everybody stands, and they tried to find some common ground on Iran. Basically, they have found that, and that is that all the leaders do agree to the fact that Iran should be denied nuclear weapons, but that's a pretty mild thing to propose, and there's also no proposition in there about how exactly you get from here to there. The American approach, of course, is sanctions, and the Europeans are not very happy about that. They'd like to see the sanctions lifted, and they believe that in fact their method, which was the JCPOA, the Iran anti-nuclear agreement, was working, and it did not have to be thrown aside as the U.S. did. And in fact, the Europeans still are maintaining their support for that treaty. In any case, yes, it's a common ground. There's been one or two agreements on the sidelines of the conference, a bilateral agreement on trade apparently between Japan and the United States, one or two other things. That it is pretty small achievements in terms of what could possibly have been achieved here. One of the points of this G7 gathering is to gather these economic powerhouses together and use their concerted strength to accomplish certain aims, and they are a long way from doing that.
And at the start of this summit, we saw President Trump threatening to tax French wine. That was in response to Emmanuel Macron threatening a tax on tech giants like Google and Facebook. It sounds like there is now some sort of agreement on that, that both sides are happy about.
Well, it seems like that. It seems like they've worked out, the French have worked out something where they would rebate the tax payments that the various tech giants have already made and may continue to make until the OECD can come into play here with a universal, more general mechanism which can be used against the tech giants. There's a number of European countries who sympathize with France and would like to do a similar thing, in fact, because they believe these tech giants are escaping various forms of taxation, by the way, they debase themselves. Some other countries would like to follow the French, and so the approach now seems to be that they would turn to the OECD, which is the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development, and put the ball in their court and say, okay, you come up with a plan, and that would be something that will take everybody into account. And also, in the meantime, while they're coming up with that plan, then the French would rebate eventually the tax monies that they are collected under a law that was passed here earlier in the summer.
And Jim, earlier today we saw a conference, a meeting on climate change, of course one of the most pressing issues facing the world right now. But there was a very noticeable absence. The US president did not turn up. Why was that?
Yes, and the U.S. president's people said that, in fact, the reason he was not at that climate change conference was because he had bilateral meetings with Germany and India. However, Prime Minister Modi of India and Chancellor Merkel from Germany were both in the climate change conference. So we know that Donald Trump is a climate change denier, and they know also that the people in the White House would feel that they were getting sandbagged on some of these issues, that President Macron had brought up a number of topics that they didn't feel comfortable talking about.
And going into this summit, trade, of course, we knew was going to be one of the biggest issues discussed there. You mentioned already the deal with Japan and the US in principle. When it comes to the US and China, this conference began with more threats of tariffs from both sides. Now it sounds like there is some sort of level of talks being resumed. At least that's what we're hearing from the US officials.
That's right, and that hasn't been confirmed by the Chinese. But one of the things that Mr. Trump said this morning was that the Chinese wanted to get the talks going again, and they were realistic, and this is what they knew had to be done. Some of my colleagues back here are calling what the White House is doing whiplash messaging. In any case, we may see a little bit more of that.
Jim, I'll just interrupt you. We're seeing President Trump and President Emmanuel Macron now. Let's take a listen.
Madame la Première Dame, Mesdames, Messieurs.
Madam First Lady, ladies and gentlemen.
Mesdames, Messieurs, je voulais...
Ladies and gentlemen, following this G7 meeting that we have just held, and we've been discussing for 2 days now, and I'm going to report back to you. But first of all, I'd like to thank President Trump and all the heads of state and government present here for the extremely productive work and the very productive discussions that we've had since Saturday evening together. There was a lot of nervousness at the outset, a lot of expectations, a lot of tensions, and we heard about a lot of conflict, and I can say that what we were really keen on was to convey a positive and joint message following our discussions. Discussions on several topics. We haven't negotiated a very long text as promised, and you will get just a one-page declaration. Then there'll be a lot of different annexes to it, but it's just one page that covers some of the key items that were addressed. Now, we have decided to hold this joint conference. I'm going to give the floor to President Trump, and of course President Trump and the First Lady will then proceed with their own press conference to the American press, where other discussions will take place. But I just wanted to sum up the different items on which we have agreed and the topics on which we have made headway: biodiversity, digital economy, amongst others. So we wanted to hold this joint conference together because next year it is the United States of America that will host the G7 summit, and we are going to pass the baton on to President Trump. That is why we are here together. And I just wanted to say that for the last 2 days we have worked a lot together on several common points. Well, we have a lot of things in common, but one thing we have in common with President Trump is that we don't like to waste our time, and we like to achieve concrete results and provide momentum to the work. And as soon as President Trump arrived with the one-to-one lunch that we had together, and I think that those are the most productive and interesting conversations that we've had together. And from that point onward, we set the pace and kept the ball rolling to be as efficient as possible till the very end. There are a few things that are expected from both our countries. As far as Iran is concerned, President Trump and myself have had discussions in the last few weeks, and particularly in the last couple of days, and we agreed that Iran needs to comply with its nuclear obligations,